His credentials for the Derby itself. One such horse might be Canberra Legend, who's trained by my first guest, James Ferguson. James, welcome for the first time to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Things have gone well very rapidly, which we'll come to in a moment. But let's start with this week and Canberra Legend, who looks incredibly exciting. How are you and the whole team feeling about him at the moment?
Really good. You know, he's a joy to train. You know, I think with a lot of Australians, he has a very good mind. So, you know, for us, it's very exciting. He's done nothing wrong, and look, touching wood, we can, you know, he's done his final piece of work, and hopefully we can get there in one piece and enjoy the day.
And when you got this horse,
yeah.
was it your brief to think about races like this? Was his sort of reputation from the people who'd bought him and sent it to you? You could be getting a special one here.
Absolutely. You know, it's no secret that you know, Mr. Ho, you know, with his agent Mark McStay, spent a lot of money at Book One to buy this horse from Flash Conroy, who you know, liked him a lot. You know, a lot of people came up to me after he was bought to say, you know, did you get that one? Did you get that one? And you know, I was very grateful. I was sat next. You know, Mr. Ho decided to send him to me, and you know, we realised pretty soon when he came into the yard. You know, he was a very, very big 2-year-old, and he just had a bit of a presence about him. You know, he was never going to be a sharp early type, and you know, like I said, he's been easy enough to train, and you know, showed us early that he had ability, but didn't want to be rushed.
Trainers will often say, yes, horses might need time, but by the same token, you can tell quite quickly whether they're any good or not. Is that your experience with him?
Absolutely. I think all horses show ability early if they've got it, and then they tend to go a little bit weak on you. And he certainly showed ability early. You know, Danny would have ridden him work as an early 2-year-old.
And Danny Muscat, who's
absolutely a big part of it.
Might be his Derby jockey.
Well, we'll see. Hopefully, yeah. Well, I mean, I hope he is. Yeah,
we'll come to that in a minute.
Yeah. Yes, you know, so he, you know, everyone in the ride. I've got a very, very good team of riders, and you know, a very good team of staff, and you know, together we all decided, and that, you know, he was a nice horse, and that we should treat him with extreme care.
Treat him with extreme care, but also treat him with the confidence that he's a good enough horse to take you to the race that every single trainer wants to win. You're going to put him on the Derby trail.
Absolutely, and you know, when he won first time out, you know, it was all, you obviously have this horse in your yard, and you hope to God that he's as good as you think he is, and because more often than not they run and it doesn't go very well. But when he won at Newcastle, it was more of a relief. Mm-hmm. You know, his mental state was fantastic at the races. You'd have thought that he'd run 5 or 6 times.
Really?
The way he handled Newcastle, absolutely.
So he just breezed his way through it, came back the next day, hadn't turned a hair, and then on you go. And then you start making a serious plan. And then
you can start making a plan. I mean, stepping up from a novice to a listed race is quite a big step, but I didn't want to fit in another novice with a penalty on the all-weather. You know, we had confidence in the horse, and because of how well he'd come out of the race, you know, a step up to the Field and Stakes, which is a proven race for good horses, you know, seemed a good option, and you know, Mr. Ho gave me the opportunity, and we took our chance, and you know, thank God it went right.
Just watching this again, and I've probably only seen this a couple of times, even though he's only won by a narrow margin, it seemed as though his rider, Danny Muscat, had every confidence that he was going to get there. You didn't feel that his body language suggested that he was going for the absolute maximum.
Yeah, well, I think you know, we fortunately, being able to train in Newmarket, is you can actually train them down that dip on the gallop next to the racecourse, and he'd worked very well there the week before, and I think, you know, he travels very strongly, and I think Danny rode him with plenty of confidence and knew that as soon as he hit the rising ground, he was just going to lengthen, and you know, Danny didn't look that animated, and you know, the first words he said when he came in was like, you know, I knew I was always going to get there. So that's always nice to hear when you're thinking of stepping up another furlong.
So would you say that he was almost surprised that he didn't win a bit more easily?
No, I just don't think he gave him an overly hard time. I think you know, it doesn't really matter how far they win by as long as they win.
Okay, so now you've got the Dante this week. What have you done with him between then and now? What's the training regime been like?
So I've given him 2 pieces of work. He's worked on the Lime Kilns and he's worked on the Aberhathry. 2 proven gallops in Newmarket. Michael Hills has sat in in both of those times, and having ridden well over 1,000 winners, he knows what he's doing.
Funnily enough, he was on this sofa a couple of weeks ago, Michael Hills.
With his brother, yeah.
He was just keeping his powder a little dry, but he does ride pretty much every good horse work, it seems, in Newmarket.
Well, absolutely. Well, he's a wonderful friend and obviously knows more than I'll ever learn. So, he's a wonderful member of the team.
So you're drawing on all that experience. He goes to the Dante this week. What does he need to do to assure his place in the Derby?
I think being realistic. I think to go to Epsom. I think with the trials that we've seen so far, and some wonderful trials there have been.
But nothing that knocks your socks off necessarily so far.
I think yesterday was quite impressive.
Okay, we'll come to that a bit later.
No, I'd like to see him run well. Hopefully, the most important thing is that he comes back safe and sound. We know we've got a good horse. Whatever happens on the Dante, he's won a very good trial in the field, and we know we've got a good horse. And I would like to see him win or place well to enable us to go to Epsom. If not, we'll potentially think about either going to France or straight to Ascot.
Which worked well last year with El Bodegon, who was only 4th or 5th in the Dante?
He didn't run very well in the Dante. He hated the quick ground. He was very much a soft ground horse. But he then went to France on soft ground and came second to Verdini. So that was a wonderful day.
It was a wonderful day. He'd done really well as a 2-year-old as well and gave you that great success at the back end of his 2-year-old career in France. You took the other horse that was in the Voltage of Deauville Legend out to the Melbourne Cup last year. It was a wonderful breakthrough year for you, wasn't it? I mean, how long now have you been training? Not that long.
So this is my 4th year.
Yeah, 4th year.
4th year training.
It's happened incredibly quickly.
Yeah, we've been very lucky. We're supported by a lot of great owners, and Qatar letting me take Mise en Scene to the Breeders' Cup, and Mr. Bonho letting me take Deauville Legend to Australia. And then my first original owners were a wonderful Australian syndicate set up by Chris Waller and Charlie Duckworth, and they provide. We bought our Bodygon for them, and he's going to go down there and coming 3rd in a Cox Plate. So I can't deny I've been very, very lucky to get the support of the people that I have, and as long as we continue to do well for those people, then I'll be very happy with what we're doing. I
mean, it goes without saying you are immersed in the sport. Your father John, who's been on the show before, he's now a director at the BHA and has been a trainer and was working with Sheikh Mohammed for an awful long time at Godolphin and in other businesses. Was there ever any doubt that this would be your path?
I don't think so. I think every young boy that grows up and is fortunate to have a pony and ride, believes they're going to be Frankie Dettori, and then they get a bit heavier and they think they're going to be Tony McCoy. I tried to be Tony McCoy for a bit and rode a lot of pointers, and very swiftly decided that I probably wasn't as good as I thought I was, and a route down the training ranks was certainly for me.
Most people who say they've ridden a bit and then decided to train, they're normally better riders than they let on. Were you doing quite well pointing?
I did okay. I rode around the Aintree Fox Hunters twice, rode around Cheltenham a few times, but it was a lot of fun. But it was probably never something that was going to take me to the professional ranks. My brother was a better rider than me, and he gave it a really good go, and he would have done very well. No, I really enjoyed it, and I think when I went to university, I went to Reading University, and just to have a backup, if you will, just in case racing goes wrong, because a lot of it's, if you don't have it, you need to have something else, in my mind, I think. And so I went to Reading University, made some great friends, and got a degree in real estate land management, and swiftly, as soon as I left, I got the job as pupil assistant to Sir Mark Prescott.
Right. So quite an important moment in your life, I would imagine, getting a role as a pupil assistant there. Absolutely, and
I still look back. I've had some wonderful jobs, but that was probably the most beneficial job, because although I'd Dad trained and I'd worked in yards in my school holidays and my university holidays, and I'd been able to travel abroad a little bit. That was my first proper job, and what a man to learn from. I mean, he is simply the best teacher there is. The amount of students that he's had through the ranks is brilliant.
We've had some wonderful anecdotes from people on this sofa down the years of their time spent with Sir Mark Prescott, and many from the great man himself. But from your perspective as a pupil, what do you come out of there knowing that you didn't know before?
Oh, huge amounts. I mean, realistically, before you, as a rider, you tend to, I was obviously fascinated in racing, but when you're working for these trainers, you're sort of just riding your horses. I always rode out. But it wasn't until I stepped back into an assistant role that you're actually working out what they're doing, how they're training them, how they work, how they, the development of horses throughout their careers. His percentage of runners to winners is phenomenal. He gets every horse to win a race, which I think is, a lot of people can train a good horse and make a good horse win a race. I think the test is if you can train a bad horse to win a race.
Is that the case, though? Because I was talking to a now retired trainer the other day, and he was talking about young trainers coming up. And he said, I don't know, and I'm not going to name any names, but he said, I don't know whether I would trust X, Y, Z, A, B, and C, all of whom had big reputations, to curate the career of a top-class racehorse. That in itself is another skill on top, isn't it?
I think so, yes. But how often do you have a top-class racehorse in your yard? And I think, when you get the opportunity, you have to take it with both hands. But
then I guess that's what we saw with Sir Mark in the last couple of years. He's rarely had one right out of the top drawer, and suddenly he gets one.
Well, he had Pivotal.
Well, indeed, but what I'm saying is rarely, once every generation, he's got. Well, it's not like the Gosdens or the Applebys or whatever.
No, sure.
And he gets one who's tip-top and gets this insane body of work out of her.
Well, he's in my mind, he's one of the best there is. So.
Yeah. So that's kind of what you learned, that developmental.
Absolutely, and William Butler, his assistant, he's been there a long time now, and he taught me a huge amount. And you've also got to learn how to manage people, because it's all very well going in and managing horses, but you've also got to learn how to manage a yard, run a yard, and manage people. And they do throw you in the deep end. You are running the yard when William's away, and when Sir Mark's away, and you go racing and you meet a lot of people, but. You do have to bring it all together, and I think what having an education at a yard like that does is when it is your time to leave, the next job you go to, you are very prepared for it, and you can almost go in there and make the job yourself. You're very ready to be an assistant in any yard that you're put in.
So you feel great confidence in your own ability to do the job.
Absolutely, yeah.
So then you had your spell with Godolphin.
I then went to Godolphin and ended up at Charlie Appleby's, which was huge. Wonderful team of people, extraordinarily courses and pedigrees, and it was a wonderful couple of years. And I was able to travel the world. I took Charlie's horses down to Australia, made a lot of connections down there, and at the end of the day, it was a wonderful experience. But for me to set out on my own, to train, it's obviously it's very different to how I'm training now. I then went to Brian Meehan's in Manton, which I loved. Very different, but teaches you the business side of things, because that's almost as important. That's almost more important as the training side. There's no point being able to train a racehorse if you can't run a business. And so going to Brian Meehan's, gave me that aspect of life. And then I was very fortunate. I went over to Ireland and I worked for Jessie for a year.
Jessie Harrington.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You're smiling as you're saying that, as though this was a very special period of your life. Is that?
She's
right?
It was a wonderful year. It was I learnt a lot, and just the whole team there, they were very welcoming, and I really enjoyed it. It was back riding, and Richie Galway and Kate and Emma, and Jessie. They looked after me very well, and dipping my, starting out training, I did want to get back into the jumps a little bit in case the flat didn't quite work out for me. And I thought that there's no better place to learn than someone who's won Gold Cups and, Coronation Stakes. She's almost done everything. She might win a Derby this year.
Yeah. She's pretty much a flat trainer now with the odd jumper, isn't she?
Absolutely, yeah. But she wouldn't want to be known as that.
I just wondered whether there was that sliding doors moment slightly. If things had worked out differently, and if it hadn't been for the Godolphin restructure, your tenure there might have lasted a little bit longer. Do you think it would have lasted so long that the way that your career then progressed would have been different? I.e., do you think in the end you've ended up training sooner than you might have done otherwise?
I don't actually think, no. I think that I was probably, I'd been there a couple of years. You know, I'm very, very close to Charlie, and he taught me so much. And, you know, I was probably reaching the end of my tenure there, and I knew I wanted to train, and I'd sort of set my sights on the fact that I wanted to train
on your own
by the time I was 30. And I was probably 26, 27 at the time. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think I always probably would have gone on somewhere else. So
you didn't really want to feel institutionalised too much? You wanted to get out, spread your wings, be your own man, set up your own thing?
Absolutely, yeah. No, absolutely. And, no, I've enjoyed every bit of it. It's been great.
And you ask this question to so many people, and it applies a lot in racing. When you have a parent who has established themselves in a senior role in the sport, does that make you yet more determined to prove yourself for you?
It does. You know, I can't deny, you know, the support that my father has been, you know, in everything. You know, he's statistically, you know, he is one of the best bloodstock agents out there.
His training career actually stands up pretty well on the numbers.
You know, he's everyone. You know, he doesn't live in Newmarket, but he comes up quite a lot, and you know, I certainly wouldn't be where I am now in training without his support and without him on the end of the phone when things aren't going too well.
So what do you think are his great attributes? What made him successful in the sport?
I think he's very measured. You know, he's seen it all before. You know, he's very patient, and sometimes when you start training, you have a horse and you want to run it because you just want as many winners as you can, when actually, you know, it's more about time. You know, he actually taught me a wonderful line. He said training is it's like a cricket match, but it's a test match. It's not a one day. You know, so you know, he's like I said, he's always been there, and yes, you know, you do always want to prove yourself, but you know, that's why I always, you know, that you do always want to prove yourself a bit different. But I'll never be, you know, and I hope people don't turn around and say, well, he's only there because of his old man, because I think we have done our own thing, and you know, yes, we've done a lot of it together, but you know, I've got a wonderful team, and you know, I'll call on his support whenever he's there.
I think the other interesting thing is that it's quite identifiable now what kind of trainer you are fairly quickly in your career. Right. So you train a certain type of horse that is going to get to a level, and then you might look to do international things with him or her. Is that something you set out with very clearly? I kind of want to be seen like this. My first owner, like I said before, my first owner was actually, along with Michael Buckley, was the NAS syndicate, which is Chris Waller and Charlie Duckworth created the syndicate in Australia. Now, Charlie's English, isn't he?
He's
very been a long time sort of right hand to Chris.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, you know, with my father as well, my father was buying the horses, and you know, to buy the pedigrees that we have here in Europe, train them to a level, because our 2-year-old training is very different to down there, and I'd like to think that we give them longevity, so then when they go down to Australia they can perform for longer. Sorry. And it's worked. We had a horse in our first year called Francesco Guardi, who went down and won the Moonee Valley Cup at you know, on Cox Plate Day this year. El Bodygon. You know, these are horses that you wouldn't be buying in Australia, but they've gone through the nursery ranks. And unfortunately, you know, I'm not going to get political, but the state of British racing at the moment, you know, the prize money is down there. You know, it's difficult to argue to leave them here. You know, obviously we have Prestige, we have Royal Ascot, which is fantastic, and we have the pedigrees. But at the moment, for me to make a business, that's how I set out. Almost be a nursery for foreign trainers, and that's how I got Bon Ho on side, because that's sort of his platform as well. You know, he's quite rightly, you know, wants to be earning prize money, wants to be able to pay for these horses that he so thoroughly enjoys, but realises realistically that in order to do it, he can buy them here, he can buy them in Arcana, but realistically, unless they're absolutely top quality, which I've been fortunate to have a few of them, they have to go to either Hong Kong or Australia to make it pay.
But I guess that strengthens your resolve to get the very, very best out of the horses that you've got, so that you are enjoying the fruit of your labour when they do show their ability, a bit like Canberra Legend. You're there for the Derby, and what happens beyond then, well, who knows?
Absolutely, and we it's not like we don't know that that's the plan, if that makes sense. So it's.
But if he wins the Derby, he ain't going to Australia.
No, but he might. We'll worry about that when if he wins the Derby. But whatever happens, I'm very grateful for their support.
And of course, you took Deauville Legend to the Melbourne Cup last year, and I got to spend quite a bit of time with you that week.
Yeah,
and that was intense because you were the favourite, and it was a race that lacked stories. Let's face it, beyond that. To say that you were the number one celebrity in Melbourne would be an understatement.
Ed Crisford was there, remember?
Well, Ed Crisford was there. He wanted to be the number one celebrity in Melbourne, but you were very much the man who was under the microscope. And just before this moment, you probably thought you were going to be an even bigger celebrity, but he just ran out of gas late. It was very, very deep ground. It
was a bit of a shame, really. You don't think you're going down to the Melbourne Cup to run on soft ground, but that's Melbourne for you. I thought he ran a wonderful race. He was given a very high weight for a 3-year-old, which was probably a bit tough, but certainly turning round before the clock tower, I thought, hang on, we might win a Melbourne Cup here. But it was a wonderful week, and as you know, the enthusiasm for racing in Australia is something that, unless you go there, you cannot understand it. And it's something that I think we, as an industry and the powers that be, could learn a great deal amount from, because, the whole country stops, the whole state, New South Wales, everything in the months preparing for this race is surrounding the Melbourne Cup. It's the front page of every newspaper. It's you're walking down the street and people are stopping. I mean, it's amazing. And yes, it was a lot of pressure, but he ran very well and lost absolutely nothing in defeat. And we've got him back, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun with him this year.
So this is a case where you have had your cake and eaten it. You've taken one of Mr. Ho's horses down under, but actually his distance requirements suggest that he probably does need to be in Europe now, don't they?
Absolutely. He can obviously. He's obviously proven that he can travel, and I think if he could come back here and win a prestigious race here and then be aimed at an international campaign towards the end of the season and into next year, there's a lot of prize money to be won. And Mr. Ho's, I'm very grateful. He's allowed me to bring him back and train him myself for an international campaign.
I think by the end of the evening on Melbourne Cup Day, we'd already decided he was going to win the King George and the Arc this season. How's that project going?
Yeah, it's going well. He's in great form. I gave him because of what I'm planning for the back end of the season. I'd love to get him to Hong Kong at the end of the year for the Queen's Vase for Mr. Ho. That was always a plan of ours going forward. He won't run until the Hardwick Stakes. Obviously, we'll see what Desert Crown and the likes do. But wouldn't it be amazing to have a runner in a King George?
And so that would still be...
He would have to run well in the Hardwick.
Number one target.
I think so, yeah.
If that all went well.
Yeah.
And then you could just bump into Desert Crown and Equinox and...
Put it to them. We'll see. He'd have to run very well in the Hardwick to consider that anyway.
And have you found, James, that what you have been doing with these horses has meant that you have been sent similar types by other people? Has it had the desired effect?
Yes, absolutely. I would like to. I'd like to be. My dream is to be in a category that people think that we can train a good horse, and that I do have a happy working team that people want to be involved in. I love bringing people into the yard and showing them around, and I'd like to think that they leave thinking that we know what we're doing, and hopefully they have a bit of fun when they do it. And obviously success is key, but if we keep going in the right direction, hopefully it will come.
Well, for the moment, James Ferguson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
James is going to stay with us.
Subscribe to Racing TV's YouTube channel now to watch more great races like this.